So I inherited a board member who just didn't like me. Can you believe it? They didn't like me. Right? Who doesn't like me? So to tell you right there is a problem. No, I digress. There are personalities that does not fit for a lot of people, and I might be one of those. So, but I did learn some lessons from that. When you inherit a board member who doesn't like you, there's a couple lessons that I learned from that. One is I learned that what you need to do is I wasn't going to be put in that situation ever again. So I learned that as the CEO, I needed to be a part of every board recruitment interview. So my nomination committee process became a member of the nomination committee, as well as myself, or a member or two members, and as well as myself. And I earned the respect of my board, and I had the power to veto. It was an informal power to veto. So basically, we did the interview process. And if I had any reservations about the person, I could voice those. And my board respected me enough to say, okay, well, then they're not a fit for the board. That's one. But that didn't come overnight. Two is I had to earn the respect of the board and share that with them, and that's a process within itself. But particularly in inheriting this board member who did not like me, right? Here's a very clear lesson that I learned is you need to surround yourself with board champions. And so a board champion is a person or people, two or three, who will have your back no matter what. And so I developed some intentional board champions, and my board champions often spoke on my behalf when this person overstepped, right? Because you don't want to be contentious so much or have battles with a board member in the boardroom. Oftentimes, do you need to stand up for yourself? Yes, you need to stand up for yourself. But you also want it to be peer to peer in a number of situations. And so developing those board champions and having those clear conversations with the board champions to say, you know what, for whatever particular reason, this person and I are not seeing eye to eye. And I just don't agree with how they want to do certain things with the organization. And let's talk about that and get them to see from your direction, right? And then when you're in the boardroom, they will be your voice. And so having clear board champions is one of those things that really is going to help you when you inherit a board member who doesn't like you, or any time that you want to champion any type of project in the boardroom and you need an additional voice besides yourself as a CEO. And so that's one of the lessons that I learned. The other lesson that I learned is, imagine this: you're in a place, a public place, and you're venting about this board member, and you don't know who's around you, and people overhear you. That's not a good thing. You should never vent about your board members in a public place. That's one. But you don't want to harm anybody in that process, including that board member, right? So you need to be very sure of your surroundings. Even if you're venting to your board champion, you need to make sure that when you are venting and getting it off your chest, that it's not in a public place where people can overhear, because our communities tend to be very small. People tend to roll in the same circles. So that's the other thing that I've learned. And it was a hard lesson to learn, because despite them not you despite the fact that you didn't jive, you still didn't want to hurt someone's feelings. And so that was a very hard lesson to learn. The other lesson that I learned in inheriting a board member that doesn't like you or not on board with everything that's happening is there's a way to get rid of board members, right? And do it in dignity. So let me give you the one of the many ways that you can, and this is the one that we'll focus on. Oftentimes, if you're having a difficult board member and you are trying to end the relationship delicately and with dignity so that you don't create a bad word of mouth for your organization, here is what I learned to do. So you make sure that you and your board chair are on the same page. You have to make sure that it's you and your board chair is on the same page. Once you know that you're on the same page, then you need to also make sure that you and the nomination committee are on the same page. So you and the board are on the same page. The board chair talks to the nomination committee or the board development committee, whatever you call your committee, and you make sure that you all are on the same page. And then from there, what happens is, usually the way I addressed it was, then you adopt a policy that they don't necessarily agree with. Maybe that's where the contention came to in the beginning. So you adopt a policy that they don't necessarily agree with. It goes before the board. You already have the board chair on board. You already have the other board members on board. This policy passes, and then more than likely they will self-select out because they never agree with that policy to begin with. So that's one of the things that I learned to do. But again, just to kind of recap, what happens when you inherit a board member or inherit a board that is not your board, that would not be the board that you would select? One is, I'm going to recap it because as I was formulating my thoughts, I want to make sure that you get this. One is, you make sure you identify some board champions. And if you say, you know what, none of these board members are my board champions, what you need to start doing is, when the nomination committee meets, use your board matrix. Use the tools that are available to you, right? You want to change this board out, not just one person. You want to change this board out. Well, you use your board matrix. You identify what those gaps would be that you're missing. And then you start identifying people that can fill those gaps. And you make sure that those that are nominated are people that you as the CEO have vetted, right? And those are the ones that you bring forth to the nomination committee and you set up those interviews. Number two is, you're always a part of the interview process when it's time to bring on new board members. I've had CEOs who are not a part of the interview process for their board members. And for me, that's counterintuitive, because if you are ultimately reporting to this board, you need to be a part of that decision-making process, because you have to work with each of these board members. And so you need to be a part of that interview process, because you need to have an informal veto, right? So that informal veto that you have as a CEO means that you have earned the respect of your board. And they know that if you have if you say, I don't know if this person would be the right fit, then they value that input and they understand that input. And they say, well, you know, they don't feel, then we'll pass on this, right? So that's a couple of things. And then the other one, again, is you're going to make sure, I explained this one, but I want to repeat it because a lot of people go, what? How do you do that? You want to make sure that when you are trying to change your board or a board member, right, that you do it in such a way that you do it with dignity. You don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. If they have been given to the organization and served their time for a long time, you want to plaque them and thank them. You can transition them to an honorary board. You can create a honorary board. The honorary board does not need to be a part of the bylaws, only if you want it to be included in the bylaws. They can come to any governing board meeting. They just don't have a vote, but they are honorary board member, and that keeps them connected to the organization, that keeps them to have that connection that they desire, and that keeps them that keeps them engaged in the organization. So there's that. Now, if it's an individual board member, again, what you can do is you make sure your board chair is on board. You make sure the nomination committee, y'all are all on the same page, and you pass a policy that they may not necessarily agree with. So one of those policies, let me give you an example. And one of those could be, we're going to require 100% board giving. And that 100% board giving, we're going to set a minimum level. They might not agree with that. They might say that, hey, board giving is my time, and I don't agree, even if they have the capacity to give, right? That could be a policy that is put in place. Some other policy that could be put in place, and we had this conversation because we were a youth serving organization, and we did lose a board member because of this. Believe it or not, it was not the intent, but it did happen. All our board members had to go through background checks. That was a policy. Before, that was not a policy. And we said if the staff have to go through a background check, then the board should have to go through a background check, because they're representing our organization. We're a youth serving organization. And so the board members passed that. Each board member had to pass a background check. Well, we passed that policy, and we actually had a resignation that was submitted by a board member. So it is those types of ways that you can make sure that you are moving forward with the board that you want, and also being able to get rid of a board member that may not be the best fit for the direction that the organization is headed in. So those are the lessons that I learned from inheriting a board member who did not like me. So at the end of the day, those are delicate situations, and you want to make sure that you handle them with honor, and you want to make sure that you handle them in a way that the organization is not damaged. And sometimes it can't be avoided, to be very honest with you. When personalities clash, or when people don't agree with certain policies or directions that you're going in, then it's going to happen. And you just need to be aware, as you assess the full situation, that it is worth it in order to move the organization in a particular direction. Because if you leave a person up there who is not necessarily just being difficult, but who is disrupting the pattern and the direction and the vision, and you can't move forward because that one person doesn't allow it, or there's maybe a clique of people, 2 or 3 people that does not allow it, then you're going to find yourself in a situation where you can't get that vision accomplished that you desire and that the rest of the board desires. And so you have to move them off of the board. And again, you can do that in a way that's dignified. And again, if you haven't learned anything from me, you CEOs who are not a part of the board interview process, you need to be a part of the board interview process. And if you are a CEO saying, what's the interview process? Oh, baby, you need my help more than anything, because all of your board members should be going through a interview process. It is an honor to serve on this board. We do not just take any warm bodies. We are here. We have a mission. We're trying to accomplish things. And as a part of that, you are interviewing to be a part of our team, and you have to have that mindset. And so if you want to have that mindset, make sure that you sign up for my free webinar, How to Engage the Right Board Members Without Seeming Bossy, because you know that you got a recruitment process. You know that your organization is worthy of the right board members. And when I say right board members, these are board members who you have interviewed, you have vetted them. They understand they are giving their time Not only their time, they're giving their talent, and not only their talent, they're giving their treasure. So you have the right board members, and you want to engage those board members without seeming too bossy. And so that is what I wanted to come on and share today, because I start to think about these things, like all the lessons I've learned in the 2.5 decades of running a nonprofit organization and serving as a CEO. And that was one of my most challenging times in that journey, is when I inherited a board member who just didn't like me. Right. And what did I learn in navigating that? And how did I avoid that situation moving forward? For 15 years, I had a great board. We all got along, but I did inherit a board member who just didn't like me. And how did I navigate through that? So I hope that helps someone out here today. Because I know that can be challenging. And I know there's someone who said, I'm a new CEO and I inherited this board. Like, I'm still learning this board. I inherited this board. First 90 days, I'm going to say observe, observe, write down the changes that you think needs to be made, do a listening tour, go and meet with all your board members. I'm getting into something else. I'll come back tomorrow and talk to you about listening tours. So I don't want to overwhelm you. So I hope you got that. You deserve a good board, but in order to get that good board, you need to make sure you have the right things in place, like recruitment. You need to make sure that you have your board champions. You need to make sure that you are moving people off the board in a dignified way and changing out and replacing people in a strategic way by doing a board matrix. Woo, I know it's a lot, but learn from me, someone who's been doing it for 2.5 decades, who had to deal with a board member that they inherited, which was not a good situation. You ain't got to learn the hard way. Just take the lesson from me. And so I hope this helps somebody, and I'll see y'all tomorrow. Now, tomorrow, what has come up for me is, I guess I will talk about what we alluded to, and I'll come in and I'll share about the listening tours if you are a new CEO, because that too was instrumental when I inherited my organization. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.